Get my 6. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid, the most popular homesteading channel on the entire internet that has absolutely nothing to do with homesteading. Let me reverse again. Clearly, y'all aren't the only ones who've been missing the stories. And boy, do I have one for you today. So, for those of you who aren't used to the long video versions, I know mostly I've been doing shorts, telling jokes. This is no joke. It's one of the strangest things I've ever experienced in my life. But yeah, watch back here because there may or may not be a Bigfoot Sasquatch living in the woods behind my home. And I'll tell you this, if the answer is yes, if it's definitive, Bigfoot don't care about your stick figure family. This shirt is actually what led to the amazing thing that happened to me today. It's a kind of thing that you can't make up. I couldn't write a story like this. Like Mark Twain said, and I write pretty good stories. I'm going to plug one, Isle of Capri, Filipino version of the Bigfoot Sasquatch in their folklore. Mark Twain said that writing fiction is harder than writing nonfiction because fiction at least has to be believable. This story, it's not going to be believable, but it happened this morning. So I was out this morning running an errand, and I was waiting on a person at a certain location, and there was a small business where I was waiting on somebody. I was picking somebody up. And the small business happened to sell something that I was going to go somewhere else and buy later in the day. And I thought, this person's running behind. They were 15 minutes late. So I said, I'm just going to go in here and buy that thing, even though it might be a little bit pricier because it was a small privately owned business, not a chain. But I don't care because I understand the value of my time. And by saving time, I was saving money. So I go into the store and I find what I was looking for, and I'm walking up to the cashier, and it's a Sunday morning. It was maybe 8:30 in the morning on a Sunday. There's like nobody in there except me, the cashier. And she reads my shirt and she giggles. She laughs about it. And she was a woman that was probably about 60 years old, a Caucasian woman. And it started a conversation. And I had the time to kill. Again, I knew my friend was running behind by 15 minutes. So she said, Bigfoot. What's the other name for Bigfoot? And I said, Sasquatch. She goes, yeah, that's it. And I said, well, when in doubt, just, say Bigfoot Sasquatch. That's what I do. And of course she started laughing. And she was like, there's people that actually believe in that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Trust me. I said, I've done a lot of research and I've entered myself into the audience of folks who believe. And she asked me what I thought of those people. And I told her, I don't judge them, whether people are convinced Bigfoot Sasquatch is real or if they're convinced it's not. I don't judge either way. It's like with religion. You've got people who are Christians. You got people who are of the Jewish faith, the Islamic faith. I don't judge anybody in their faith. I pride myself on being non-judgmental and non-critical. People who are critical and judgmental, they remind me too much of my father, and I swore I'd never be like him. Unfortunately, there are times I find myself doing that, but I was raised by a very critical father, and so I go out of my way not to be that way. And when I get in the presence of people who are, I exit their presence as quickly as I can, and I make sure not to enter their presence in the future, if at all possible. So I'm not going to judge somebody and say they're an idiot because they believe in Bigfoot. But then she asked me about my research, what it entailed. And I said, well, a lot of it entailed, reading everything I can on the subject matter, Googling the subject matter, but even going as far as to go out into the field and look for him, her, it, or they, look for these creatures. And I shared with her about how these creatures kind of exist. There's a Bigfoot Sasquatch type creature in every major culture on Earth. For example, in the Philippines, it's called the Capri. In Australia, it's the Yowie. China, it's the Yeren. In Nepal, it's the Yeti, the abominable snowman. Even England has one called the, like the big hairy man or something. Seriously, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I was going to say something, but I won't. I'm of Irish descent, so I've got to bite my tongue. So anyway, she didn't know this, and the most fascinating thing about this to me is that these urban legends in all these different cultures date back to before world travel was certainly common or really even known of in most places. So it does make you kind of wonder if these creatures at one point did exist around the world, because where did these stories come from otherwise? So she then asked me if I ever found, and I told her, that I finally told her I'm a writer, and I said I was researching the Capri on a certain island in the Philippines, and I ended up writing this book. I highly recommend it. You can get it in print or Kindle on Amazon. It's called Isle of Capri. It's of an adult nature. Sex, booze. I don't know if there's any rock and roll, but it's not for kids. So she asked me if, while doing any of this research, if I ever saw anything, if I ever ran into anything that would make me believe that Bigfoot Sasquatch does exist. So I thought about it, and I almost mentioned the video that we filmed in October of 2019. And I swear I'll try to link it on to the end of this one if you haven't seen it. It's called He Discovers the Lair of Bigfoot Sasquatch, and it's made loud and clear that he is not welcome. You remember that? That's where we actually caught something in the background when I was doing the panoramic view of the Blue Ridge Mountains, because the leaves were all the different colors. And I stopped turning the camera, and then something walked behind a tree. I actually showed that to my son's flag football team when we had this team cookout / camp thing here about a month ago, because they were asking me about it. And one of the young people there, one of the young men said, "Wow, coach, there's actually 2 of them." And I said, "What?" And so we ran the tape back, and there were 2. Wow. And I just saw a fox run right across my trail in front of me. He's in the brush now, so there's no way I could. Makes me wonder what's he running from, though. So keep getting my 6. So much wildlife here. This place is like a wildlife preserve. I love it. So I almost told her about that, but then I thought, no, there was another situation I wanted to tell her about, but we never got there. And you're going to find, this is the amazing thing that happened. I said, I'm not so sure I've ever experienced anything that would make me feel one way or another that Bigfoot Sasquatch does or does not exist. But there were certain times when I believe I experienced some things of a paranormal nature that are not explainable. And I wasn't even looking for them. I was out there looking either in the Philippines, I was looking for Capri. If I was here, I was looking for Bigfoot Sasquatch. If you saw the movie, Bigfoot Sasquatch, the movie, you'll remember there's the scene where I was in the Himalayas looking for the Yeti, and those a-holes that filmed that thing actually left me in Nepal to make it back on my own. So I told her, though, about the paranormal stuff. Well, she got excited, and she said, oh, I totally believe in that. I believe in spirits. I believe in ghosts. And I said, you do? And she says, yes. Now, listen, pay very close attention. It took me I was hoping this would be a 9-minute video, but it's taken me 9 minutes to get to it. This is where stuff got weird. It's serendipity. I so believe in serendipity. So she says, my parents owned an old mansion, and this is like from the 1800s or 1700s, something like this. So it's not as big as the modern, like you think of English lord estates. Well, those aren't modern, but it was like 5,000, 6,000 square feet. So they owned an old mansion that was hundreds of years old, and it was haunted. They converted it to a bed and breakfast, and guests would stay, and they would tell her parents the next morning, it's really neat that your cat came and got in the bed with us last night. Well, she didn't have a cat. They were seeing the ghost of a cat. And some people would talk about seeing a seaman or a pirate. And so So the woman then says to me, she says, the mansion, I'm going to be I'm going to screen specifics because I don't want to get sued from telling this story from probably one of my cousins. Seriously, this is a weird story. She says, she says the mansion used to be owned by a very famous whaler, or a popular whaler, up in Massachusetts, and his name was, and she said the name. And I said, oh my God, you are kidding me. And she says, you've heard of him? Most folks haven't heard of this person outside of our community. And I said, that's my great grandfather. And folks, I wasn't putting her on, and I'm not putting you on either. My great grandfather on my maternal side is one of the most notorious / famous. He's famous and notorious pirate / seaman in U.S. history. The U.S. Coast Guard was designed around his way of doing things. He sometimes would impress people, which means he would hijack ships and kidnap whoever was on them. But when a ship went missing, governments would come to him because he was actually Scandinavian, but he spent a lot of time in the New England area of the U.S. He would go to Canada, England, mostly Ireland, and parts of Europe. But they would come to him and say, listen, we've lost a ship and this many people are on it. Will you go get it for us? And if they were willing to pay him enough money, he would. One time he saved, I think it was 243 people on a lost ship, brought them back, towed them in. He knew the Atlantic Ocean like the back of his hand, and he knew sailing better than anybody. Now, biologically, he's not my great-grandfather. This is just family history. I've talked about this a little bit on this channel, but not much. My grandmother was kidnapped by this guy when she was a child, and he liked her, and so he kept her and raised her as his daughter. True story. My grandmother was kidnapped by a pirate, and he liked her so much that instead of human trafficking her, because it's what would happen, my family has a long line. This is not the only generation of human traffickers in my family on that branch of the tree, that fort. I'm telling you, I could tell you stuff that is completely inappropriate to talk about on social media, but he liked her so much he kept her and raised her as his daughter. And he raised her in the very house that the cashier at this small business this morning was telling me her parents had once owned and had turned into a bed and breakfast. Honest to God, true story. And so I told her this. She couldn't believe it. There's more ironies. This woman, she was wearing a name tag I hadn't looked at yet. And I said, I am not putting you on. You can Google this. And I told her my grandmother's name. And she said, what did you say? And I said it again, and she points to her name tag. She had the same name as my grandmother, the same first name. So there it is. I met a woman today working as a cashier in a small business in Charlottesville, Virginia, whose parents owned, they sold it eventually to some private people who converted it back to like a private estate. It's a huge place. Her parents owned the mansion that my grandmother was raised in by a pirate who kidnapped her when she was a little girl. What are the odds? What are the odds of any of that crap happening in the first place? I mean, how many people watching this video have a grandparent that was raised by the pirate that kidnapped them? Probably none of you, right? And then to meet somebody 800 miles south away whose parents owned the home that grandparent who had been kidnapped by the pirate was raised in. It's like I said at the beginning of the video. It's the kind of story you can't make up. So I totally wanted to come out here and tell it because I want it preserved. And I didn't mention the name of the pirate. I didn't mention the location. So you're trying to sue me, deadbeat kinfolk, because I'm making a buck or two and you're not, you can't, brah. Get the book, as well as the rest of them, because I might need legal fees after this. See you for more next time.